Welcome to the Revealed Podcast, where your stories are revealed and God is revealed in your story. You'll hear stories from people who are connected to the Red Hills region of Southwest Georgia. The people who share come from all walks of life. They're male and female, and they have different backgrounds. Some stories will leave you wondering how the storyteller ever survived. Others are simple but will touch your heart. We hope the stories that you hear encourage you in your own walk. And my name is Angie Durham, and I'm your host. I am really excited to be talking with Lee Powell today. Lee, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, you are welcome. And how funny that we had this interview planned, and I had a little Bible study over at my house last night, and here comes the Kona ice truck.
Dr. Kona to your service.
And I love that truck. You can see that thing coming from a mile away.
That's the plan, isn't it?
And can I tell you what one of the girls said about you last night?
Go ahead.
She said, he's like a tropical Santa Claus.
Exactly.
Is that what most people say?
I resemble that remark.
But you got the shock of white hair, the white beard. I mean, you got it going on. The whole persona in the Kona ice truck it just goes.
Well, thank you.
I love it. And, you and I have known one another for a really long time because, of course, we both grew up at Dawson Street Baptist.
Exactly.
You grew up in Thomasville. And you have recently moved back, though, because you were gone for a really long time.
I left pretty much in 1981 when I went off to the University of Georgia. And in 2018, we moved back.
And what's it been like being back so far?
You know what? It's been good. One of the things that is great and that I do love about being here, and I've thought about this over and over, is it is really good to know people. When you live somewhere else, you're always at the mercy. If you go to the mechanic, you hope he's not taking you to the cleaners. If you go to the air conditioning guy, you hope he's telling it to you straight. But to go here and see somebody, you know them personally. You know that they're telling you the truth and they're not trying to rip you off. And so that's been just a great comfort to say, I know this person. They know me. Yeah. I know their parents. And so that has been really nice coming back to that.
All you have to do in Thomasville is ask, and you'll find out, won't you?
Exactly.
And I know that in those years since you've been gone, of course, you got married.
I did.
And you're married to Shannon, correct? I remember reading that on the truck last night. I saw
Gotcha.
Lee and Shannon Powell. So how did y'all meet?
So when I finished at the University of Georgia, I was going to go to seminary. The Lord had called me to preach. And so I moved to Memphis, Tennessee. And I met a girl that grew up in Memphis named Shannon. She lived right off Elvis Presley Boulevard. We met one night at a Sunday school party that her church was having, and someone invited me to, and the rest is history, I guess.
Did you know pretty immediately when you saw her that this is the girl for me, or did you guys have to date for a little while?
I didn't know because, embarrassingly, there's a couple of times I thought, I know this one's the right one, and it wasn't. And so, you just, sometimes you hope and you pray that I hope maybe this is the one, but we did not, I would not recommend anybody do what we did. We dated in a very whirlwind fashion, and we married pretty much as two complete strangers.
And how long have y'all been married now?
We've been married about 27 years, I think.
Well, sounds like it's worked out pretty well.
It has worked out well.
And I know you guys have 3 children.
We have 3 children. I have one. I don't know if anybody in Thomasville's got the spectrum that I do. I have one that's just finished college, and I have one that's just starting kindergarten.
You may have the award for that.
And I have one in the middle.
So tell me, boys, girls, ages.
My daughter's name is Adie. She is 22 years old. I have a son named Asa, who is 13 years old, and I have my youngest boy named Blaze. He is 7 years old.
Well, you really do have a wide range of ages and never a dull moment, right?
Exactly. Someone asked me recently, they said, do you spoil your youngest child? And I looked her in the eyes and I said, yes, I spoil him because I'm 58 years old. I can't do discipline like I used to could do. I'm too tired to do it anymore.
Are you more laid back?
I'm definitely more late and just tired.
Yeah, I bet. Well, and just hearing about your day yesterday, starting off at 7:00 in the morning, and then I think you were at my house at 8:00 last night. So you stay quite busy. One of the fun things about doing this podcast is asking my random questions. I don't know why, but people really like to know random stuff about us. I guess they can relate to us, and it just gives them a chuckle.
Human, doesn't it?
Yeah. So this shouldn't throw you off too much, but if you could be a member of any TV sitcom family, which would it be?
The only one I could think of is maybe... I gotta say it. Sanford and Son. I love Fred Sanford. He was one of my favorite characters.
Well, listen, I feel like I did grow up with Sanford and Son because my dad had a junkyard. So we were the Sanford family in a way.
That's funny.
So I totally relate to that. Did you have an Aunt Esther?
Oh, I didn't have her, but I just loved everything about that.
Yeah, they were really hysterical, no doubt about it.
It wasn't politically correct at all, but it was just real,
Yeah.
And that's what I liked about it. It was so funny.
Yeah. Fred, Lamont, and Grady. Grady used to crack me up. I mean, we're really telling how old we are here, but you've already said 58, so I'm right behind you.
Exactly.
Well, here's one more for you. And you'll laugh about this being a pastor. So, why have we never seen a psychic win the lottery?
My standard answer is exactly. Hey, if you give me $100, I'll tell you some numbers.
I love it. Well, Lee, it's so fun, just so jovial. But a lot of people, they remember just you being live and in person when you were younger and going to the University of Georgia. And then, you come back to Thomasville, people haven't seen you in years, and you've just lived this incredible life. I mean, I've heard you talk about living in Budapest. So tell us a little bit about your story. Let's get into that. And I want to hear what happened between the time you left Thomasville and came back.
I'll start way back. Angie, probably a lot of people don't know this about you and I, but when we were young, we had a drug problem. And I'm talking about very young. My mama drugged me to church on Sunday morning. My mama drugged me to church on Sunday night. My mama drugged me to church on Wednesday. So I thank the Lord that I had parents who, they saw that church, God, faith needed to be a part of your life. And I really give my mom so much credit because I know it was so hard getting her getting me and my sister ready for church on Sunday morning. We would fight each other and usually get out of the church, pull in the church parking lot, we'd be all crying. And then, you wipe your tears away and act like everything's okay. You walk in the front door like you're a saint. But that was what I grew up with. When I grew up in a church, but at about age 16, I honestly, Angie, I looked around one Sunday morning. I could drive then, and I looked around and I go, I don't know if there is a God. I did have self-awareness that I lived in the Bible Belt, that the church was very cultural, and it really is and was. It was. I don't know if it is anymore. But is there a real God? And I heard about the Lord working in a place. And interesting enough, not many people know this, but I got up from church before it started, and I got in my car, and I drove across town to another church. And they had a really young pastor who's become like super well known now. And he got up and he preached with such conviction and such an anointing, really. And I remember thinking this, there may not be a God, but he believes there's a God, and he believes it's real.
Yeah.
And I was drawn to his passion and his fervor, and I began to go. And it was during May of 1980 that the Lord revealed himself to me as the living God. I got saved. I knew the Lord had come into my life, but I didn't know how to walk with God. Nobody ever really told me, I didn't know what to do, honestly, with all of that. And then I got accepted at the University of Georgia. I was getting ready to go. And I would say just before I go off to the University of Georgia. I always like to read. And so it was a Friday night. I'm reading a book called The Late Great Planet Earth by Hal Lindsey.
Yes, I'm familiar with that book.
It was a New York bestseller back in the day in the 70s. And so I'm reading that book, and in the middle of just reading that, the weirdest thing happened that has ever happened in my life. God spoke to me.
And that was the first time you had really heard God's voice at that time?
Other than getting saved and giving my life to Christ, yes. And he said, I want you to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ. It was so loud in my spirit that my mom, I'll never forget, I don't know where my sister was. My dad was still working. It was pretty late, like 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. I looked over at my mom to see if she could hear it too. And I just kept looking at her, and she was reading the paper, it was in front of her face, and she didn't lower it and go, hey, did you hear that? She didn't do anything. I didn't know what to do with it, so I went into my room. I got my Bible out, dusted it off, and in the very back of it, I wrote in pencil very lightly because I didn't want you to pick it up one day and go, what did he say?
Is he crazy? Yeah.
But I wrote, on September the 9th, 1981, the Lord God Almighty called me to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ. I closed it up, put it back.
And that's just so amazing too, because you bring up something that I think is very valid, is doubt. Because what I was hearing from you when you got up from church that day is you were thinking, is there really a God? And so you had some doubt. And I encourage people, if you've got doubt, take that to the Lord. Tell him that you have doubts. And I think so many times people are scared to share that with God, but he'll take our doubt just like he did with Thomas.
Right.
And say, hey, let me show you.
The Bible even tells us God is the one that gives us faith. So faith is even a gift from God.
That's true.
It is a gift from God. So God, and it is God who reveals himself. You can't find him. You can't do it until God opens your eyes. He can be standing right next to you. But the Bible talks about Jesus making the scales fall off of somebody's eyes.
Yeah.
And you remember when he was walking with the disciples after he'd risen from the dead?
Yes.
He was talking
on the Emmaus
to them.
Road.
But they did not know who he was.
Right.
And it says, and finally he lifted where they could see. So God is a revealer, and he wants to reveal himself to everyone. Just say one thing. I have my youngest boy, Blaze. He's special. And I've done this with all my kids, but he's the one that I do it now. There's something about hiding and watching them come to get you. And you're watching all the places that they're looking. And every once in a while, when they think they can't find you, you say something, whoo, or you knock on something, so they hear you. And so they keep looking for you. I think in some way, I wonder if our Heavenly Father likes to watch us seek.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And
I love the way
when
you
we
just put that.
When we just feel like giving up, he does a miracle. The sun comes up again, or something touches us and go, hey, he's out there. Because the Bible tells us clearly, even the creation is saying, look around. Mm-hmm. This did not just happen.
Yeah.
Somebody did this.
Yeah.
And it's just something to draw us to keep looking.
Yeah. It's so funny, and people may think I'm really off my rocker when I tell this little story, but I got up this morning at 5:30, and I don't do that as often as I should, but I love going outside and just seeing the stars and just, having a little bit of quiet before everything starts waking up. But I guess about 5:45, all these owls woke up. And so I was hearing just this symphony of owls, and I just started laughing so hard. I was like, God, you created these goofy owls, and they just make the funniest sounds. And so I think you're right that there so many times we feel like, we can't see him, and obviously we can't, but he's right there. And he, like you said, you're just in that little corner and you're waiting for that kid to find you. And when they do, it's just so much joy too.
Exactly. So I'll go to the University of Georgia, but I got that call deep inside of me. And you know how it is when you first go to college. Here's pretty much, I don't know what kids do today, but here's pretty much, hey, my name's Lee. What's your name? Hey, Angie, good to see you. Where are you from, Angie? Thomasville. Oh, I know somebody in Thomasville. So what are you studying? What do you want to do? And people would ask me, so what are you going to do? What's your major? What are you going to, and I would, every time they asked me that, I'd make up something different almost. I don't know. I'll be an astronaut. I'm going to be a cowboy. I'm going to be whatever. I would say some kind of job. But Lord would go, no, that's not. No. And I'll be honest with you, that from 81 to sometime near the end of the 80s, that was one of the biggest struggles I had. I did not know what to do with that. I did not. Be honest with you, I don't want to lie, but really and truly, to be honest with you, I didn't want to be a preacher. I did not want to be a pastor because I liked the way I was doing things. I was doing it the way I wanted to do it. And I enjoyed it. And strangely enough, I was listening, it was a Saturday afternoon, I was listening to the stereo in Athens, and Willie Nelson came on the, I think it was Willie Nelson, came on the radio, and he sang a song. And it was this: I gotta get drunk, and I sure do dread it. I love country music people.
Oh, I do
They're
too.
so real.
They are, yes.
And honestly, for the first time, something kind of woke up on me because I was getting ready to go out and have some drinks with my friends, and but I didn't really want to. I was tired. Good gracious, I think that's what happened every night in Athens.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, man, I'm just so tired of doing this. It's starting to lose its allure to me. I just feel like this is going nowhere. It's the same cycle happening over and over. I don't know what I want to do. I got a call from a friend who said, hey, I didn't know what you were doing, but we're going to have a couple guys over tonight. I wanted you to come by. And it was something different. I heard that these guys had given their life to Christ, and they were trying to live for the Lord. They were also in my fraternity. So I went over to their house that night, and one of them said to me, I heard one time that you were called to preach.
Wow.
And he said, can you just tell me that story? And I pretty much told it about like you just told you. But that was something happened that night that my life turned around, and I began to follow God. And I don't even know why, but I just started reading the Bible. I had one of these, like, you remember those little Your Daily Bread?
Yeah.
That was the only devotion I had. So and I didn't even really know what to do, but I would read that, and that would be but man, I began to believe it.
Yeah. It started sinking into your heart.
Yes, it did. And I started praying like crazy and saying, God, could you help me do this? And it was kind of, probably foolish stuff like, God, can you help me get enough money to eat today or something?
Yeah.
And somehow I found $1 on the ground or something. It's something crazy, but God began speaking to me and showing me and revealing. And I really could say, Angie, that's pretty much been a pattern that God speaks, shows, reveals, points. And I don't always do it, but I've tried to follow it, especially in the big stuff, to say, okay, God, this is what you want me to do. I'll do it.
Yeah. And, he speaks to us in ways that we can understand, too. So it's going to be personal for Lee when he speaks to you. Right.
And, I've been a pastor for 31 years now, and so my understanding and knowledge is way better than it was back then, but I just, here's what I believe. God wants us to know His will.
Yeah.
He's not hiding it from us. It's not like a mystery. It's not like you were saying, like astrology or something. So
yeah.
God has a perfect plan and will for my life. The Bible says in Isaiah, his purposes will be fulfilled in me. So it gives me great comfort that God's going to bring about those purposes. He wants me to know. He revealed to Moses exactly what he wanted him to do on the mountain. Yeah. I want you to go down there. I want you to talk to Pharaoh. He's not going to listen to you, but I'm still going to work a miracle. He told him exactly where to go, when to go, how to go, what to do. Yeah. God wants to do the same with me. And listen, if I'm willing to wait and get a word from his word, let his word speak to me.
Yeah.
If I'm willing to say, God, I'm not going to try to work out. So Moses tried to work out the circumstances. You remember he killed the Egyptian. He tried to do it on his own. But if I'm willing to wait and say, God, you work out the circumstances. And if I'm willing to then move and step will open the doors. And most time, if you really want to know the will of God, God will give you a word from the word. You just have to let him work out the circumstances. Wait until he opens the door. And most times, Andy, if you have friends, they'll go, you know what? That's for you. They don't always see it. Samuel didn't see that David was going to be a prophet. So others can't always see it. Sometimes you may surprise people, but when it happens, people know. I'll never forget when I finally told my parents, I'm going to go in the ministry. I was working for Flowers then, driving a bread truck in the summertime. My dad drove up there the next day. He said he was on a trip to Atlanta, but I think he came to see if I was on drugs or something. But I told him in there, so they've always been a blessing.
Well, and I do want to talk about your parents because your mom was one of my Sunday school teachers, and I was in middle school when she was my Sunday school teacher. And I can just remember her having to put up with middle school girls, and you know how they can be just so catty and they, just want to do their own thing. But she was such a great teacher, and she just wove so much truth into me. And
good.
And of course, I know she's no longer on this earth, and I know y'all miss her terribly. But what a great lady.
My mom was what I wish I was. She was solid rock. She didn't get highs, she didn't get lows, she just stayed steady. And I remember church was about to begin on a Sunday. I was talking to a lady about something fairly important. Mm-hmm. And my wife came and said, I need to talk to you. And I looked at her, and my wife normally knows, don't bother me on Sunday morning. Please don't drop a bomb on me on Sunday morning. Come on, I'm getting ready to preach. And I said, I'll be with you in just a second. And I kept turning to talk to that lady, and my wife tapped me on the shoulder again. She said, I need to talk to you. And I said, I looked at her kind of with my eyes open going like, hey, I'm talking to somebody here, And I said, I'll be right with you. And I turned, and she tapped me one more time. She said, I need to talk to you now. So I walked into my office. I'm thinking, what is going on? And she said, your sister called, your mom's dying. And I said, what? And I called my sister. She was at the hospital. She said, your mom's dying. I don't know how long she's going to last. I mean, it's church is starting. They're singing the first song. I go tell one of the leaders in church, I said, I'm sorry, but I got to go right now. And, I'm getting emotional talking. Sorry.
No, that's what this podcast is all about.
I drove down to Thomasville as fast as I could. My oldest daughter, she knew my mom. She rode with me.
Were y'all just north of Atlanta at that point?
We were in Waleska.
Yeah.
And anyway, it's 300 miles exactly to Thomasville. Got to the hospital. I walked in. And I said, Mama, I'm here. I love you. She looked at me and she said, I love you. Last word she ever spoke. Next morning, she was gone. It was a tough time because my mom had been ill. She had not been able to go to church. She did not have any contact from church, sadly. But so my sister and my dad said, would you do it? Would you do her funeral? It was really tough because truth of the matter is that you just push emotion out of the way. And you just go, okay. You go see people I've known all my life, Darrell Allen, Jimmy Dukes at the funeral home. Go see somebody can you fix my mom's hair for her? Go buy her a dress. Just get up there and preach. And it was about 3 days, Angie, after that it all came crashing down. Just like, oh my gosh, my mom's gone.
Wow. So literally in those days after her death, you had to just go into a different mode.
Yeah.
You just had to lay the emotions at the door and just say, okay, I've got to serve in the role of pastor. Yeah. Basically. And
I was wondering, even as I was talking to you, I've got tears running down my face going, I wonder if those emotions are still down in there.
Yeah,
They hadn't all come out yet.
Mm-hmm. Well, sometimes, we'll stuff things down.
Yeah.
Because life goes on. And I talked to somebody the other day who was going through that. They heard one of these podcasts and it just brought up some emotions in that person. And they said, I realized I hadn't grieved. And I've got to go through the process.
Yeah. Yeah. I am a jovial person. I tend to, try to see the bright side of everything. And even when I'm hurt, try to laugh about it. But, your mom's one of your best friends ever.
Yeah.
She loves you when nobody else does.
Right.
I jokingly tell people all the time, I know I'm good looking because my mama told me I was. Your mama, they think you're beautiful even when you're not.
Yes. Thank goodness for that. And of course, I saw your sweet dad this morning. I love Sheriff Carlton Powell. And as I was kind of thinking about interviewing you, I thought, in a way, Lee and Kay were almost like PKs. Pastor's kids, but y'all are sheriff's kids.
Yeah. Exactly.
Because a lot of limelight is on you, is what I mean. And so I'm just curious, how was that growing up in Thomasville when your dad is the sheriff and everybody knows your dad, everybody?
My dad, I remember one time he had to come to school to bring something to me. And I'll never forget, I was probably about 4th or 5th grade. My dad's tall. He's taller than me.
He is tall, yeah.
And I remember he walked in. He had a cowboy hat. He wore a Western style hat.
I remember.
And he was a deputy then. He had his gun on. And until I was 30 years old, I wanted to be a cowboy, And I was thinking, man, he's the biggest man I know. And he was a hero, to me. I just thought, nobody, as a kid, nobody's bigger than my dad. And I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
I guess, man, I have so much respect for my dad. He's still the voice of wisdom I go to and say, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? But I will say, for me, my friends in high school knew who I was, but everybody else in Thomasville, I was just the sheriff's kid. I didn't have a name,
Yeah.
I had a job one time at a mobile home place here in the summer. They called me Opie. Sheriff Taylor's kid, Sheriff Powell's kid.
Yeah.
So, in one sense, my dad, I feel like, has a legacy that you better not even try to live up to it, because I feel like, he's done so many great things, especially considering where he came from.
Yeah.
What we're saying around our house this year is one more time,
I love that. I love that slogan. Well, did you ever feel any pressure, though, from being that sheriff's kid to just...
I really didn't, Angie. Listen, I loved my parents. I wanted my parents to be pleased with me. I was one of those, I was the kid that my parents said, hey, don't do that. I didn't do it for the most part. Don't go there, When they told me that kind of stuff, listen, both my parents, my mom, I don't know if you know, she worked in a juvenile, court. She dealt with teenagers that were gone off the thing, and she was telling them about putting them in jail and sending them off and all that kind of stuff. My dad, every Sunday after church, until I could drive my own self, I would ride home from church with him. And my dad had a routine. He was always on call, so he drove his car to church. I get in that car, we drove to the jailhouse. It was on Stevens Street.
Did he put you in the back of the car?
No, he put me in the front of the car. And what he would do, he'd pull in there and he'd fill his car up with gas for the week, So he'd start on Sunday after church, he'd fill it up. So as they filled it up at the jailhouse on Stevens Street.
I remember,
you remember
when
that
it was there.
jail?
Yeah.
And so I'll get out of the car. Here I am, 10 years old, and I can remember standing there. My dad would go inside the jail. He said, "I'll be right back." They had to fill out some kind of paper. I'm getting so many gallons of gas or whatever. But I could hear those prisoners go, "Hey, hey, hey, little boy, could you call 226-3317? Tell my mama I need some money." Or, and I would hear it, and I'll go, "I don't want to go in that place." And I'll tell you that Stevens County Jail, Stevens Street Jail, that was a scary one.
Yeah.
Steel doors, you could hear them clanking from about a mile away. The jailer had a set of keys like in the movies with, 1,000 keys on it. Oh, my goodness.
Life was a lot different
Exactly.
back then, wasn't it? Oh, my goodness.
So, I don't think I just wanted to do what was right. I played football at Central. I tried to do what's right. I tried to study hard.
Well, let's go back to the University of Georgia. So you go to that meeting, so to speak, or Bible study that night, and your friend brought it up again. Hey, I heard one time that you were supposed to preach. And so what ended up happening after that night?
I sort of crossed the Rubicon going, "Listen, Lord, I'm going to follow you. I don't know what it's going to look like. I may follow you all along, but I'm going to follow you." I went back. I came home, got a job. That's when I worked at the mobile home plant down out here. And I went back to school, and I was almost finished. But at this point, my dad had said, "Listen, we helped you this far, but you're on your own from here on out." And I said, "That's absolutely fair. You've done above and beyond anything." And so I started working my own way through. I had a job as a janitor at a church. I go in the morning at 4:30, clean all the offices and clean the church up.
Wow.
I also had a school there. So I'd get it all ready. I'd finish about 9. I'd go to class till about 12:30, 1 o'clock, come back, work till about 6 o'clock. It was enough to keep me going, pay my rent and that kind of stuff. But it wasn't enough to pay for school too. So at about after the fall semester, or it was quarter system, fall quarter, and the other quarter, I was out of money, and I didn't know what I'd do in the spring. And I heard a church. I knew that at that time I was going to go into the ministry, so I heard a church was needing a music and youth pastor. I'm not a great singer. I was in the music and drama troupe, though, and I learned from Mr. Allen, how to move people and how to, look like you know what you're doing. And thank God for stuff like that, that happened. And long story short, I got that job while I was still at the University of Georgia. And I began to be the music and youth pastor at Bowman Baptist Church in Bowman, Georgia. You never heard of it. It's way up there it's right almost on the South Carolina border. And so it was I drive back and forth to Athens every morning, but I did that next 2 years. I decided, hey, I'm going to go to seminary. The guy that was the pastor there, he said, "Listen, I went to Mid-America." And he said, it's the only conservative Baptist seminary left at this point. And I didn't keep up with stuff, but he was right. And at that point, it's different now. But so I went there, and Mid-America, I didn't know this, but what happened was, I shared a little bit with you, it was the conservative professors from all the seminaries that joined together to create a Bible-believing, that was what their biggest phrase, we believe the Bible, mission-oriented seminary. They stress all the time, 90% of all the preachers in the world live in the United States, but only 10% of the population lives here. Think about that. 90% of all the preachers in the world live in the United States, but only 10% of the population. Why wouldn't you consider going somewhere else? And they would do pleas like that all the time. And one time we had a missionary come in, and he talked about Africa or someplace, and at the end of that service, they gave a altar call of some sort. And I remember saying, I felt the Lord begin to pull on me. And he said, "I want you to step out on the aisle." And I was just standing there. I said, "Lord, I'll go anywhere you want me to. I'll go to China. I'll go to," I was thinking of the worst places possible in my mind. And I never finally forget, the Lord said to me, he said, "Lee, I'm not asking you to go to China or Romania or Africa. I just want you to walk to the front of this building. Can you just do the little things? I went, oh, okay, Lord. I walked down there, and that was it. There wasn't anything, other revelation, or there wasn't anything go for that. But during that time, I had the opportunity. Somebody called and said, would you like to go with us to Haiti? So I went to Haiti. I pretty much, Angie, I don't mean it in a bad way, but I left there going, Haiti's not for Lee.
I've been to Haiti before.
I had worked all summer in Memphis. The temperature's a lot like Thomasville, real humidity, a lot of humidity with that Mississippi River running through it. And I remember I worked outside. I was 20 years old, 20-something years old. I worked with my shirt off all summer long. I was cleaning yards and stuff like that. I was working for it was a big church, and I was keeping all their property. They had football fields and everything else. And I thought, I'd go down to Haiti, man. I can take this heat. I remember thinking about after 2 days, I'm going to die down here. Then the guy who was the pastor at Bowman called me up. He said, listen, would you be willing to go with me to Eastern Europe? We are going over there to try to open up doors. The wall had just fallen down. This is 1989. Mm-hmm. Would you go with us to Budapest? And then it was called the Czech Republic.
Yes.
Or Czech. It was called Czechoslovakia. And I said, yeah, I will. And I went. All I remember, it was cold and gray. But I always had a sense of adventure. I always wanted to see the world. I always wanted to go outside of Thomasville. That's one of the reasons honestly, it sounds bad, but I was like, Thomasville's a small town. There's nothing wrong with a small town, but there's a big world, and I want to get out of this town. My dad is so big, I can't get out from under his shadow. I need to get out of Thomasville. I need to find my own place in life. And so I went there. I ended up getting I started pastoring a church in Mississippi. It was great, man. It was the most exciting time of my life. I was single. The church exploded with growth. We quadrupled in size. We built 3 buildings and paid cash for them as we went. I mean, it was unbelievable. We were in the middle of, it'd be like having a church in Metcalf, but we led 3 counties in baptisms every year I was there. And one of the counties was Lafayette County in Mississippi, which is the University of Mississippi, Oxford area.
Yeah,
and so
yeah,
we would lead in baptisms every year. It was amazing. I met my wife at the end of that time. She and I get married. 94, we moved to East Tennessee. And I had just gotten married. I thought, man, I've had a great run here. I'm going to show my new wife, who I don't know, I'm going to show her how great a pastor I am, and she's going to see this church grow. And I'll stop right there to say, this is one of the things that the Lord, this is my gift to the church, and this is how the Lord has gifted me. God sends me to places that have lost hope, that don't have leadership, that don't think they can do anything else, and then you go in and you fix it, and you give them inspiration. You show them that, hey, God knows where you're at, and even here in the middle where you don't think it can happen, God can make. The Bible says He can make water come out of a rock. He can make the desert turn into a garden, and so to give people that hope, and so that's been what God's gift is for me. I know that I'm not ever going to go to a great church because they don't need help. They got it all going down. You guys got a great church here. That's not the place that God sends me. So all of that to say is, it was a struggle at that church. I think it was a struggle in a lot of reasons, but the Lord began to do something in me. And one of the things He did to me, and I'm talking about Revealed podcast.
Thank you.
God revealed to me His grace. It was, for lack of a better term, it was almost like I got saved all over again. When I began to see that Jesus had done it all, I had been striving to make God happy, just like I had done for my parents. If you work hard enough and you do what's right, but what you really begin to realize is you fail and you beat yourself up about it. But then I began to realize when Jesus said it's finished, He had paid for it all, and that God no longer saw me as a failure, but saw me. The Bible, my favorite verse is 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 21. He says, God made Him, Jesus, who knew no sin, to be sin for us. What an amazing thought that God reached down. He took every failure, bad thing that I do and that I still do. He took all that, and the ones that I'm going to do tomorrow, he took all of that. He put them on Jesus. Jesus dealt with it. Jesus took care. That in itself is amazing to me, Angie. Yeah. God would do that, take all that off of me.
Right.
But it doesn't. It gets better. God made him who knew no sin to be sin for us, that Lee might become the righteousness of God.
Yes.
He puts the robes of Jesus on me. God doesn't see what I'm doing. He sees who I am.
Love that, Lee, because I see so many people who will just beat themselves up. And one of the things I'll tell people is give yourself some grace. It's okay.
Yeah.
And many times our perception of God is formed in our relationship with our parents. And I see a lot of people who are just, they're scared, if I make a mistake that God's going to judge me. And if you're diligently seeking him with all of your heart, and even if you misunderstand him, he loves you so much that he is always going to turn something for good.
I had a Russian friend tell me one time, and I thought it was a beautiful perspective. He said that life is like a game board. And he said, even if you move the wrong way, God turns the whole board to get you in the right way.
Exactly.
And so God can even take those mistakes. Listen, I told you earlier, Isaiah 46, God's purposes will be fulfilled in me.
Yes.
No matter what I do, ultimately God's purposes are going to be fulfilled in me. I believe that. All that to say is when that grace revealed to it changed me so fundamentally. I didn't think I could stay where I was at anymore. I had been in Baptist churches, and I'm not blaming Baptists. Listen, they're my family. They're where I grew up. It's my heritage. But I think it's in all churches. There is a spirit of religion that says, listen, if you do. And the Bible says, and grace says, it's not do, it's done. And religion says you do to be. Grace says you be to do. You become something, and that's going to change what you do. It changed me so much. We started a small church. It was, it was community church.
Y'all are still in Eastern Tennessee?
No, by this time we moved back to this area.
Okay.
For just a brief time, we started a small church. It's still in existence. I don't know how. I didn't know what I was doing, but we knew that, listen, we needed something fresh. We needed something grace-inspired, grace-led. In the middle of doing that, the hardest thing I ever done in my life, where I thought, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't do it, I'd get a call one day from a church in Budapest, Hungary.
And you had already been over there one
time.
time.
I had been there once. And they said, listen, we are looking for a guy who grew up with a Baptist background, but who's willing to minister to people outside the Baptist circles. Would you be interested? Well, I'll be honest with you. Number one, just the very idea of thinking to get to move out of Europe, what I was doing was so hard. I would about traded it for a well digging job. It was starting to get so tough. And we moved. My daughter was 2 years old. We moved over there. It's so interesting. I saw a guy who was in the church that I had started here. He was at Fallon's Barbecue one day, and I walked over there and I spoke to him, and I said, how are you doing? Good to see you. What you up to? And he was having dinner with some guy who I did not know. Anyway, he said, this is so-and-so. I don't even remember his name. And I said, hey, how you doing? Lee Powell shook his hand. And anyway, they were eating. I was getting ready to eat. And so I'll let you guys go. And I turned to walk away, and the stranger that I did not know said, can I tell you something? I went, yeah. And he said the strangest thing to me. This was before I heard from Budapest. He goes, I saw an anointing from the Lord, and you were riding it like a tidal wave on a surfboard. And he said there were people from all over the world that were riding with you. I looked at him, sometimes you
did you say, thank you, crazy man, or did you?
That's sort of what I thought. I said, but what I did say to him, I said, if that's from the Lord, I receive it.
Yeah.
If that's God's message for me, I hear it. Then I hear from Budapest. All the details work out. We're getting ready to move. The day before we get on the plane, I go to the YMCA down here on Dawson
Don't
Creek.
tell me you saw that man again.
I run into him. Never seen him before. I don't think I've ever seen him since. But I run into him coming in as I'm walking out of the thing, and I stop him because I'd heard about the church. I'd already visited the church. Our stuff was on a ship headed that way. I saw him and I said, do you know who I am? He goes, no. I told him that story I just told you. He goes, I said, I'm going to pastor a church, people from all over the world. So we arrived at the International Church of Budapest. It was a English-speaking church for expatriates that lived in Budapest, Hungary. So there were people from every English-speaking nation on the planet, some that didn't even speak English very well, but they wanted to go to a church. And so they came to that church. And it was just an amazing time. You know, it was, we tell people all the time, it's like heaven on earth. People from all over the world. We would do sometimes the counting of the nations, and I think one time we counted 35 different nationalities on a Sunday morning, but all joined together, worshiping Jesus, singing praises to his name and seeking his face. It was a fantastic time.
That is so amazing. And just to think that man spoke that prophecy over you.
To this day, I was just all like, I don't know where
I want to know who that dude is.
Yeah, I don't know who he is either.
I want to go see him.
I don't know if he even knew. As a matter of fact, when I told him, he said, did I say that? I'm like, yeah.
Wow. Well, and that's just it too, is God can just speak through the most unlikely of people. And I've even heard Charles Stanley say before that he would preach a sermon. He would be greeting people as they left the church, and they would say, I love it when you said so-and-so in your sermon. And he said, I didn't say that.
Yeah.
So it's just amazing how we can also hear exactly what God needs us to hear.
There was a lady, her husband, Samsung, had a huge presence in Budapest. He was the CEO of Samsung. They were Korean. She invited us over to her house one day. And I knew her. I don't remember her name right now, but, we knew her. We saw her every Sunday. She never failed to be there.
So they were
very friendly. How are you
from
doing?
Korea, but they were
Koreans,
Christians.
but she was.
She was.
He wasn't. And how are you doing? She said, I'm doing fine, Pastor. You have a good week? Yes, I had a good week. And so she invites me and my wife to lunch, and we go over there. When we get there, Angie, we realize she knows only those catchphrases. Like, she doesn't know English.
Wow.
So we start trying to talk to her over a meal, and this is getting a little bit hard. And so my wife finally says, how do you understand the sermon? And she said, this was amazing. She said, it's very hard for me to talk to you here, but when Pastor Lee speaks, the Holy Spirit translates, and I know everything that he says. I can follow him perfectly. God reveals.
Yes.
He's the revealer.
Yeah.
He reveals in spite of us. Not because of us, but in spite of us. And we were there. But, one day I was reading the book of Philemon. And Philemon's the story of Paul writes Philemon, who owned slaves. There was more slaves in the ancient Roman world than there were Romans. And Onesimus, his slave, had escaped. And I don't know where at, but somewhere in his escape from Philemon, he ran into Paul and got saved. And there was one line in there, Paul says, I think it's about verse 8, Philemon, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm going to send Onesimus back to you, but he'll be better than before. And when I read that, Angie, the Holy Spirit again spoke to me and said, I'm sending you back. You'll be better than before. That's after we'd been in Budapest for almost 10 years. The next Sunday, we had a baptismal service. After the service, we went for a long walk in the park. At that point, the Lord had blessed us with a little boy who was born in Budapest, Asa. He was born there, and my wife said, do you think we'll ever leave Budapest? I said, I want to die in Budapest.
So y'all loved it that
I said,
much.
I'm half Hungarian, And anyway, but I do feel like things are coming to a close for us. We've done everything we set out to do. We wrote down all the things we wanted to see happen. Every one of them had come to fruition. I said, it's probably getting close. I said, unfortunately, we have been gone from America for 10 years. Nobody even knows we're alive except for our parents. That night, I got a call from a church in Waleska, Georgia, of all places. A couple that had been in the church in Budapest had retired from their work and moved back to America to a little place called Waleska. And they said, we know a guy who could pastor this interdenominational or non-denominational church up here. So long story short, we ended up moving there in 2013. But I'm in my office and I get a phone call, I pick it up, and it's my wife, and she says, hey, can you talk? I went, yeah, I can talk. What's going on? I need to talk to you about something. And I said, are you okay? She went, yes. I said, where are you? She said, I'm in Walmart. In the bathroom. I said, what are you doing? She said, I just took one of these pregnancy tests, and I don't know if it's positive or not. At that point, Angie, I'm 50 years old. I went, don't worry, it is not positive. I said, I'm too old.
And how old's Shannon at this point?
Shannon's 43. And I said, don't worry about it. Everything's okay. She said, I'll send you a picture. So she takes, the phone and she sends me a picture. It was glowing. She said, I can't tell if it's, you can see that line. I said, are you kidding me? And I just started laughing. I'm backing up a little bit. I didn't really care if we had kids, but when we had a daughter, then I wanted kids. I love that girl, man. I love that little girl. She is a blessing. And I just said, man, look, I want more kids. God. And I started praying, God, give me kids. And one day I was reading in Psalm 128. It said, they've changed it now in both the NIV, but I looked it up in the Hebrew. But the old NIV, it said, your sons will be like fruitful vines around your house. And the Lord said, that's going to be you one day. I walked in from my office that I had there in Budapest, and I showed my wife, I said, it says right here, your sons, plural, will sit around your table one day. I was 40 then. And I didn't know this, but the Hungarians invented in vitro.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and the clinic was just about 2 blocks from our house. It's walking distance. And I said, let's start going down there and talking. And we did. We didn't do in vitro, but we did a lot of other stuff, to try to enhance. We had a lot of trouble having our first daughter. And so my daughter was pregnant, even though she was 3 or 4 years old. She's saying, God, she was asking me, why won't God give me a baby brother? I've been praying. I've been asking. I don't have an answer for that, something like that. And anyway, we did all kind of stuff to try to have a kid. But one day I felt like the Lord said, listen, Abraham didn't wait on me. And he got something he didn't want that caused him trouble the rest of his life. And so, then I began to look at myself going, listen, why am I so focused on trying to get something else? I already got a beautiful child. If that's all I have, still, that's more than I deserve. And I love her. She's amazing. And so long after that, my son Asa was born. And so I felt like God had fulfilled it. I have a boy now. I have sitting at my table. But God, that verse said sons. And when my wife told me that, I started laughing. I thought about that verse.
So I was going to ask, did you think about that verse?
Yes, I thought about that verse. And I told her immediately, I said, we're going to have another boy. She said, how do you know? I said, because you remember that verse I showed you back in 2003? This is him. He's here 10 years later. And I knew exactly how it's going to play out. My wife's parents, man, they're believers. They're so supportive always that they were going to say, this is so exciting. This is wonderful news, But my parents were practical people. I knew what they were going to say. What are you thinking of, Lee? You're 50 years old. How can you have kids at this age? Who's going to work for them? Who's going to take care of it? I could hear my dad asking me all these questions, my mom. So I didn't know how to break it to him, tell you the truth.
Yeah.
So I thought about it, and this is what I did. I called them up, and I asked them if they could both get on the phone at the same time that I needed to talk to them. And they did. And I said, hey, I need to talk to y'all about something personal.
I feel like you're almost a teenager and you're having a baby out of wedlock and you're scared to tell your parents.
So this is what I told them. I said, I need to talk to you about something personal. I said, I don't know how to tell you this, but something has happened between me and my wife. And I said, it was small at first, but it's gotten bigger and bigger. And before long, it's going to be news to everybody. We cannot hide what's happening any longer. And at this age and at this many years being married, it's kind of embarrassing to share this with you but I don't want you to hear it from somebody else. And this has gotten so big now, I've got to tell you. We're going to have a baby. They both went.
I bet they did, because even I knew the end of that story, but you built that up, so I would have come through that phone and wrung your neck for that.
It's always how you push it. It wasn't as bad as they thought it was going to be.
Good grief.
So Blaze was born. Blaze has Down syndrome. I've never been around a Down syndrome person in my life. Emory had a Down syndrome unit, and he was born on a Friday. He spent the first 4 days in ICU. Nobody would tell us he had Down syndrome because the hospitals, they got on all these rules. They don't want to tell you that, but we knew something wasn't quite right, and something was wrong with his breathing and heart.
And so y'all didn't know ahead of time from tests?
No, we didn't take tests. But we were like, God sent this child.
This is our baby.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, right.
So we don't need to know and be worried and all this kind of stuff. But when he came so fast. I mean, from the moment that Shannon started having him, 15 minutes later, he was here. It was just like wham, bam, it was over. And
that's a perfect name then, Blaze, because he came in kind of in a blaze of glory, right?
Exactly. And but he started having some breathing issues that night. And they said, we're going to have to put him in ICU. And they said he might not make it. It was kind of scary, and I wasn't really worried about, honestly, we didn't know Blaze. So if he was gone, it was going to be sad and we would grieve later. But I was worried about my other kids because they were excited. I was worried about my wife, My kids, I didn't even know where they were. They were staying with strangers. We didn't know anybody up there. We hadn't been there that long. Anyway, I called my dad and my sister, and I asked them to come. They came, thankfully. And I said, if that baby dies, it'll be bad. And I said, and I'll take care of my wife, but I need somebody to just watch my kids for me. They came. That Sunday night, they asked a doctor from Atlanta, a heart specialist, to come in late that night, and he walked in there, and he the first thing he said to us, he looked at me and my wife, and he said, he's Down syndrome, right? And we said, we thought he would, but nobody would tell us. He said, yeah, he is. And he said, he listened, he goes, he's perfectly healthy. He came so fast, he didn't squeeze all that fluid out of his lungs, but probably by about this time tomorrow, he'll be breathing fine. The doctor was exactly right. And but the next weekend, I went to a Down syndrome for new parents, just me by myself, and, just trying to soak in everything you could about this new child I had. And this guy, Blaze, is all boy. I mean, he likes to wrestle. He likes to throw stuff. He likes to take a stick and hit stuff. Just all boy. It took a while to get over the shock of having a child and having a Down syndrome child in your home. But about 2015, I began to come to a realization, I'm going to have a child at my house till I die. This one's here for a while. I began to think, what am I going to, how am I financially going to support these guys? And one of the things that became increasingly clear, the church is getting smaller and smaller. I'm getting in my, by this time, I'm about 53, 54 years old. I'm not a young pastor. You know, churches like, we want a young pastor with a young family. I always would joke, go, I got the young family, part down. To think, Lee. So I could see that was going to happen. And I also, I knew what those type places paid. It's just not enough to raise a family. The churches are trying to do the best they can, but it's not enough to raise children from birth all the way to grown. And if they're going to live with you forever. So what can I do? I got a college education. I got a master's degree, but I don't have anything that translates to getting a job somewhere. Maybe what can I do? And one day I was looking on Facebook of all places, and I saw a classmate who he went to Thomas County Central High. We graduated in St. Cloud, but we also went to Georgia at the same time and rode back and forth a few times. He had gone into the military. He was a Apache helicopter pilot for several years. He got out. He worked in several retail stores, manager of a Walmart, but he walked away from all of that and opened up a crazy Kona ice business. I called him up. I said, hey, you may not remember me. Yeah, I remember you. Tell me about what you're doing. So he started telling me about Kona ice, and I started listening to him. And then I said, I hadn't talked to you in like 40 years, but could I come over to your house one weekend and ride with you one day? We started at about 5 in the morning. He had to do some stuff, and then we got to the first place, and about 1 o'clock I went, I think I could pull this off. I told him, I said, I think I'll just head on home. I drove home. I told him, I said, I think we could do this. I scraped together our money, and we put in the steps process to move. It was almost 2 years to this date.
I love that too, because God will just give opportunities to take care of our family, because he did bless you with this wonderful third child, and he's not going to abandon you or forsake you and not give you what you need to be able to raise that child.
Exactly. Part of me has thought that one day, the Lord willing and I'm able, that it could be a job that my Down syndrome boy could do with me.
Lee, it has been just so much fun talking to you today. I really appreciate you having the courage to come forward and just share all these details of your life. I want to encourage anybody that's out there that may need prayer, or if you want to get in contact with Lee, you can reach me at Angie@revealedpodcast.org. And if you'll go on your favorite place to listen to podcasts and give us a rating and give us a review so other people can find hope in this world. Thanks, Lee.